Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thanks for giving us your evening on this really fine day. I'm Alaha, I'm your Ops and Community Lead. Today, we're really stoked to have you here for another Early Relate online event. Before we begin, I would love to know why you're here today. If you could give us an emoji reaction in the chat. Give us a rocket if you're looking to build your startup. Give us a heart if you're here just out of curiosity. I'm gonna give you a few minutes. Hello everyone in the chat. We have hearts, we have a green heart. Lots of curious people. We have a rocket. Ooh, we have two rockets. We have one more rocket as well. Lots of people curious and actively building. Sweet, we have hearts, rockets, love it. A mix in our audience. Our mission at Earlywork, going back to what we do, is to build meaningful careers. And one of the scope for tonight is exploring an alternative career right after uni or before even joining uni. And we complete our mission in two ways. So number one, we offer content. So that's our free newsletter on offering tips and tricks for people who want to break into startups and break into certain roles. And we have a free Slack community that you can connect with different people. Tonight's special guests are young founders who have built their startup while at uni, before uni, or even not at uni, which we'll get into later today. And as we go today, feel free to screenshot any part of the event or any takeaways that you gather or resonate with and tag us on social media. We always appreciate love being shown to us in public. And with that, I will kick off our first question to our panel. Let's start with Liam. Liam, can you tell us about your startup and who were you before you started your venture?
Take myself off mute. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, looking back to where I guess previously starting before Instant, started my first business when I was like 13, 14. We were traveling around Australia and the world. So both my parents were police officers. They both got injured on the job, kind of long story short, and we went traveling for maybe 3.5 years. And that's where I started my first business, which was a travel blog. We grew, a bunch of followers on social media across Instagram and Facebook. And then eventually stopped traveling. I went to uni. So I did actually study. I went to uni and studied business and marketing. And at the same time, I fast-tracked my education to finish year 12 at 16. And one of my marketing assignments was looking into kind of the recent growth of e-commerce towards the middle of COVID. And I basically started an online Shopify store, drop shipping products. And that's where the vision for Instant came from. So yeah, now looking to where we are today, Instant is pretty focused towards simplifying the way people shop online. We work with brands to simplify their online checkout experience. And that's kind of the first phase for us. And now we're kind of really starting to embark in building out our product suite outside checkout to more of like an instant commerce type engine. But yeah, in short, that's kind of me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's crazy how all the dots connect looking backward and where you are at Instant and where you're creating. Moving on to Cara, would you like to pitch us your startup and who were you before you started your venture?
I'm not sure if I can do a pitch in front of everyone right now. I'm a bit rusty. Hi, everyone. My name is Cara. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Steppen. At Steppen, we are helping young people, so like our age demographic, build a habit around working out. And in terms of who I was before Steppen, honestly, I can't say that much because I started Steppen when I was in university. I was studying software engineering and psychology at Monash. And basically, like every good startup, I had a problem that I was facing and I was kind of annoyed and pissed off that the solutions out there weren't good enough. So I'd go to gym. I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of like, this is shit. Why is there nothing that's built for like uni students, for high school students? And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see if there's something out there. I'm going to talk to other people my age. And I realized a lot of people were facing the same problem. There wasn't one solution that everyone was using. And then I just it snowballed from there. I'm sure we'll go into a bit more detail about how that happened, but it kind of just snowballed from there. And for some reason, I thought that I could be the one to kind of pull this off. And Steppen is now where it is now. So yeah.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Lucky last, Grace.
Yeah, so I'm Grace. I'm one of the co-founders at Andromeda, and so I guess we build robots. We build humanoid robots. We build healthcare humanoid robots for Australia's elderly and disability sector. So our first prototype is Abby. She's a full scale, kind of full scale. She's the size of a 5-year-old child, so 120 centimeters in height. And we've been conducting a few different pilot trials around various facilities in Melbourne. I guess that's the quick version of what we're doing. I'll give a better pitch tomorrow at StartMate Demo Day. In terms of who I was before startups, I've actually been working on Abby for about 1.5 years, 2 years, but she wasn't a startup at the time. At the time, I was just very interested in robotics, humanoid robotics and bipedal locomotion. And so she started off as just a bit of a passion project. But I've always been super into building. I've always been very much into electronics and hardware and programming. I guess before that, I always thought I was going to be a mathematician. But then I ended up, I really enjoy building things. So I ended up being an engineer, compromised. But yeah, that's who I am, I guess.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Going to the next section, which is much more about decision making. For example, one of the questions right now that I have on my mind is, while you're going at uni, what inspired you to start your own startup while going through that journey? Maybe starting with Grace this time is what inspired you to do that?
I think I always knew I wanted to do my own business. Like my mum's run a few of her own small businesses, so I've sort of seen how it works from a young age, and what it takes. But I think I guess, I don't know, it was it's almost like a little bit glorified a little bit, I guess, especially in the tech and startup, tech and engineering sort of STEM ecosystem, where every mechatronic engineer's dream is to build your own robotics startup, go to Silicon Valley, contribute to the next robotics conglomerate. I don't know, at least I've always sort of had that vision of doing something like that. I think, actually what really pushed me to do it was we actually won a pitching competition before we were a startup, and we weren't a startup, but we were pretending to be a startup. And then so we ended up just trying our luck. And then that's where we met Lauren Kaplan as well. She was one of the judges on the panel, and she introduced us to StartMate and got us to pitch in front of the first believers. And we just got a bit of hope that, hey, maybe we could make a startup out of this somehow. Yeah.
Awesome. Fake it till you make it. Cara, would you like to tell us what inspired you to start while you were at uni, your own venture?
Yeah, so as I kind of alluded to before, I had a problem that I was facing, and honestly, I think it was just kind of a bit of right timing. It was the middle of COVID lockdown, and uni happened to give us an extra week break for mid-sem. And I thought to myself, you know what, I've had this idea for ages. Why don't I actually do something about it? And I just kind of started doing the discovery process for the idea and understanding, I guess, is this an idea faced by other people? How big is this idea? What's the competition like? Blah, 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 blah. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So I was really lucky that early on I had a mentor, Simon Rake Allen, who I was intro to, and I called him the first week that I had my idea, and I said, this is my idea, what am I meant to do? And he kind of said, call me back this time next week, and by this time next week, speak to 20 people. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to speak to 20 people? But then I did, and then I called him back the same time next week, and then it was kind of like that at the start, and I built up my confidence in the idea, the space, and then eventually realized that if I actually really believed in it, I was going to have to do something about uni, and defer it. And that's kind of how it went. But I think the reason that I believe that it was possible is just now because there's been enough success stories in Australia about startups, broadly, if you think about Canva, Afterpay, etc. And I think Canva's a good example because Mel was so young when she started Canva, that it's they can do it. I guess someone else our age can kind of do this. So I think that definitely those stories gave me belief that it is possible, albeit I don't think I understood at all how difficult it was going to be, but it did give me belief that it was possible to definitely start a startup.
Love that. Speaking of success stories, Liam, you're one of the success stories of the youngest pre-seed founder in Australia from the biggest venture capital raised from. What inspired you? I guess goes back to starting with the problem, but what inspired you to start your venture? Well, before you were even 20 years old.
Yeah. So I think similar to Cara in my space, in my case, is definitely kind of similar in terms of starting with my own problem, really. As I was kind of saying before, I started talking about, I was at uni, I was studying business and marketing, and one of my marketing assignments was basically looking into this whole problem. And so you could probably thank like one of my uni lecturers, I guess, for getting instant going in terms of I had to start an online store. I had to market that online store. I had to get my first sale through that online store. And then so this assignment slowly turned into a side hustle, which then naturally, like any business, something starts working and then you want to make more money out of the thing that's working. And so I wanted to make more money, and I was trying to find a way to make more money. And I was finding that a huge amount of people that were visiting this store, whilst I was generating, a good kind of revenue source out of it, there was a huge amount of people that were dropping off in the stage of either adding the item to the cart and then dropping off, or visiting the website and never adding anything to the cart, or adding the item to the cart and going through the cart and entering their credit card information, but never completing the order. And so originally, in all honesty, it was just a way for me to make more money by speeding shoppers through the checkout. And then I didn't know how to build it, so it kind of came to a halt. I finished my uni, and then I found my co-founder, Will, who could actually, as a software engineer, help me build it kind of early last year.
Interesting. Kudos to going to uni to start this whole journey. The other question that I have is, about risk. From a very young age, you were told to kind of like follow a very stable path of going to graduate programs and working at a company, getting promoted. Really fascinated with the decision making for founders when starting their own company, for choosing to take a risk with such high quote unquote failures for starting your own thing. What's your mindset in terms of like that risk that comes with starting your own thing at such a young age? What are your thoughts around that?
I'm happy to take this one to start. I honestly think the best time to start a company is at that age. Like, I think that our risk is really minimal for a lot of us. A lot of us don't have kids. A lot of us don't have a mortgage. A lot of us are also just starting our career. So like, we don't have a huge reputation or pressure of what we're meant to achieve. So I really do think that the best time to start is young. And also, whatever happens, like personally as a founder, you're going to learn so much. Like, I've learned way more doing this than I ever did doing uni, which is why I'm unsure if I'll ever go back. I'm not sure what will happen there. So I think that all is like reasons to definitely just jump in and do it. And I think always the hardest part is just getting started. So yeah, I would just tell everyone that put the rocket ship emoji on, saying that they're looking to start a startup, that this is hopefully your sign that you should do something about it.
Yeah, I think from you go, Grace.
No, you go. That's right. You go.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, yeah, I mean, definitely risky, but I think it's also risky at no matter what stage in your career or life journey in general that you decide to lead a company. I would, whether it's leading a company that someone else has started, that has risk elements, whether it's embarking on a new career, that has risk elements. But starting your own startup, that's obviously really high kind of on the risk scale. But I'd say that the elements of that risk are different at different stages that you decide to kind of go on the journey. For someone that's really young, maybe it's like lacking experience or lacking people that you know that can help you, just lacking generalist kind of ability that you maybe haven't learnt working for someone else. Whereas, like Cara said, later in your career, it's like, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids, you've got all these underlying kind of things that you need to worry about. So I would say looking at it from the other perspective, rather than looking at it as being risky, it's like, what are you comparing that risk to? Because early in your career, it's like you're learning a lot. There's a lot of fulfillment that comes with starting a company. There's, you're building a very generalist mindset. You meet a lot of people. You make a lot of mistakes. You also do a lot of good things. And so from risk versus reward, I would say that it's, very rewarding at the start of your career.
Cool. Grace, did you want to add anything?
Nothing more than what's already really been said. I totally agree with both Liam and Cara. It's at a point in our life right now, it's where our expenditure is probably at the lowest. Like I can live off minimum wage. I mean, most students are living off minimum wage. But then if you ask people who are a generation older, that's just completely unfeasible for their lifestyle. So it's so it's definitely, I do agree that now is such a good time to do a startup. And I think a lot of people think there's risk in terms of if it doesn't work out, it's a failure. It's a failure on your resume or something. And that's just completely not the case at all, because if anything, I found that starting my own startup has given me a much wider or a more holistic perspective to actually how the world works. So I feel I have, just like Cara mentioned, I've gained so many skills and a lot of knowledge that I wouldn't have gained at an intern or at a really large corporate company, potentially. Not that there's anything wrong with that either.
Interesting. Going back to what Liam kind of mentioned as a generalist kind of skill, I would be interested to know what mindset or skills has helped you in your current role. I mean, there's definitely, you haven't worked in a company for 10 plus years and then started a company. At such a young age, what is something that the mindset or skills that has helped you in your current role as a founder?
I'm happy to go. I actually wrote some things down before this session, just in advance of that. I think it's really easy to go, well, you just got to go for it. But that's actually really hard. And so I think for me, I was kind of sitting there, and I think the biggest thing is never be afraid to Google search. I would say is the first thing I would say. Generally there's an answer on the internet that you can find, or at least the skeleton to get you started in terms of resolving something. So having the mindset, something I say across the team a lot now, is don't be afraid to Google search an answer. I think people feel like they need to fix something with their own brain incomplete, rather than trying to leverage existing information, existing people, existing experiences all the time. And then, off that, it's not reinventing the wheel, looking at what other people have already done, other companies have already done, and enabling that across not only yourself, your co-founding team, eventually your leadership team, and then eventually your whole team, to not reinvent the wheel and kind of Lego brick together to come to an outcome that you want. And it's always having the mindset of reverse engineering to an outcome, rather than focusing on we want to build the world's biggest company, or we want to take over checkout for the world. It's well, what are actually the outcomes to get there? And being very outcome focused, I think, has helped us a lot along the way.
Does anyone else want to add before I move on?
Yeah, I'll just go off what Liam said. I think that the Google search thing is so important. I think the most important skill as a founder is just being able to learn shit really fast. The amount of things that you don't know and that you have to become an expert in a week is ridiculous. When I started Steppen, I had no idea what product was. I had no idea what UI, UX was, or anything about design. I'd never managed a team before. I'd never been in charge of people or set goals or set outcome driven things, whatever, or talk to investors. You don't know any of that stuff, and you need to become really, really good at reading literally 5 articles on Google and being cool, I know exactly what to do right now. I'm basically an expert at this after a 10-minute Google search. So I think that's really a really important mindset. And then I think the other mindset that's really important is just accepting that nothing's going to be perfect. I think, I'm not sure if it's a founder thing or if it's a me thing. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think at the start it was really hard to realize that what you need to put out there doesn't need to be like the finished product. It just needs to be something to get information, and then you can continue improving it to be perfect. So I think those are two really important mindsets to take as a founder for sure.
Yeah, great points. Moving on to kind of like a later stage after you have the idea and you want to solve this problem. At what stage do you decide that you want to raise funds from VCs or angels for your idea that you have? Maybe starting with Grace, would love to ask you, at what stage did you decide to join an accelerator would be the best option for your idea?
So my co-founder, Taz, and I, we're both mechatronic engineers. So we're very much very technical and very much like building the product. But we had no idea how to actually build a startup. I think one of the first things, like we mentioned to someone, like, how do we build a startup? They're like, oh, just go look at Y Combinator. And so we binged their like podcast for about a week, and we're so inspired. And then we just realized that there's just a lot that we didn't know about building a startup. So we actually joined a few pre-accelerators first. So we joined one here in Melbourne, the Map Velocity pre-accelerator. We joined one by Blackbird, specifically for students, Wild Futures. And those just sort of gave us like the foundations of, you know, what's product market fit, what's, you know, different, like we didn't even know what pre-seed or seed raising was. We just knew we wanted to build robots and make a living out of it, and we're going to somehow try and make it work. And so yeah, and then we applied for the summer cohort, but we actually didn't get into the summer cohort for StartMate. But we took on the feedback, and the feedback was very much around, we weren't customer focused enough, which was so true for us. We were like, we want to build robots and we're going to change the world because we're going to build awesome robots. But then the problem isn't so much about your passion about what you're doing, but it's who's going to buy it. There's a huge market risk, and that's what a lot of investors want to know is, how can you de-risk the market risk, and how are you going to prove and demonstrate that people are going to buy a product that you're going to build? Because even if we built the most eloquent, beautiful, robotic system, maybe no one would pay anything for it. But we did go out, take that feedback on board. We got a whole bunch of partnerships and LOIs, like letters of intent to lease our product, and so now we got into StartMate and are pitching for seed now. So yeah.
Ooh, congrats. You guys are first ones to know about this. So going to Liam, would you like to share?
For us, it was about going full time. I think we had I found my co-founder Will. We started building out the product together, and we were kind of just hacking away whilst doing other shit at the same time. Will was still full-time employed, and I was doing whatever, running the magazine, I think, at the time. And so it was very much on the side. And so then we were like, look, to be able to take this to the next level, to be able to actually turn this into a company and do what we want to do, we initially just needed another software engineer. So we went out to raise basically 200K angel round to hire one software engineer and pay Will and I a small amount of money so we could go full time and have a bit of money left over so we could actually run the product. So we did that. We raised a small angel round. We got it up and running. We hired Patrick, our first software engineer. He joined us from Uber. And it was the team, us three, for quite some time before we then raised another round. But that first round, which was the angel round, got our product in market. And that was the core goal, to go full time and to get a product in market once we had our first customer secured, basically.
Interesting. Cara, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so we realized we needed to raise money when we realized we had no money, and that what we actually wanted to build was going to require someone to pay someone something. So we initially bootstrapped the product and got initial MVP built by a development agency in Australia. And then I remember Jake calling me, my co-founder, and saying, like, we literally have like $5,000 left in the bank. What are we going to do once this product launches? I was like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? We actually have no money. Like, how are we going to get a developer? How are we going to do anything? And that's when we realized that we needed money, because if we wanted to employ developers and we really wanted to bring the product in-house, we were going to need to start paying someone to do something. So that was our initial reason that we raised. I think ideally though, you raise capital because like the ideal situation is that basically investors are telling you to because they want to give you money. But it doesn't always happen like that, especially really, really early stage. Yeah.
Yeah, really see some like testing grounds and validations that have occurred before raising the fund. Going back to, I guess, like founding your own startup, did you have any misconceptions about what it'd be like to be a founder now that you are a founder that has changed your mind? I guess, what are the misconceptions that have changed now that you are a founder?
I had a lot of misconceptions. I think I've already touched on this a little bit. I started Abby as a startup because I thought this would be a great way to build robots for the rest of my life and make a living out of it. And the paradox is, in order to have a company that's operating so that you can build robots, you have to actually build the company first. And so a lot of my role has sort of defaulted to a lot of pitching, a lot of even the way we pitch Abby is so different. The first time we pitched Abby, we went off talking about like the fact that she was like using GPT-3, the fact that she's using like these sort of fast algorithms, that we're doing these implementations for her bipedal locomotion, and investors just didn't give a shit. They wanted, and so it was, and that hurts a little bit as like an engineer, you know, when you're so passionate about the technology. But it's good because it makes you think more about how can what you're building that you're so passionate about actually be used to make people's lives better and also turn a profit as well. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what investors are there for. So, and I think, so I've pitched Abby completely differently now, and I get a little bit of imposter syndrome with both sort of ecosystems that I'm a part of, you know, because I don't want to lose that identity as an engineer but I also have to, anyway, it's a whole thing, but I guess I won't get into that. Yeah.
Cara? Anything you've recently changed your mind on?
I don't know. I feel like it was such a long time ago that I was like starting. I think on one hand, I thought that it was going to be much easier than it was. And on the other hand, I thought it was going to be much harder than it was. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think that when you hear startup stories, it's always like they launched and then like straight away they had like 1 million users and like raised these big rounds and like they IPO'd and everything was a huge success. So I think that very much it is glorified being in a startup, and it's not like that. But at the same time, you do hear like that the founders that made that company go huge were working like 100 hours every week and like didn't sleep and had like no life outside that. And I think that it can very much move between the two, and not both, like neither is right exactly, but it does kind of move between the two. So I think that's would be the misconception for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my end, I would say a little bit more straight to the point compared to Cara. Cara and Grace. I think you can't be everyone's best friend. That's probably my thing. I think when I first started out, it was like talking to everyone, replying to every LinkedIn message for everyone that would reach out. And I think I actually think that's the correct mindset to have in the early days, because you want to meet everyone. You want to meet investors, potential customers, just people, just just anyone, right? Because they critique things, or they give you that maybe that energy boost that you need to keep going, because most people tell you that you're doing amazing. So maybe you just need that in the early days to keep going. Not sure. But I think, as you kind of, I think in reality, it's like, I mean, you can't be everyone's best friend, and everyone's not going to be your best friend. And just focus on the thing that you've set out to do, rather than trying to put a smile on other people's faces. I think that's probably something that I maybe tried to do a little bit too much in the early days. And yeah, just a second point to that is like your whole journey changes as well. From what we kind of went out to do, we had this is exactly what we're going to build. It's going to be a massive company. This vision, this problem that we're solving is going to be awesome. We got to build this. Like, we won't change anything. This is it. And let me tell you, everything changes. So that's probably the other thing I'd say.
As Liam was talking, I thought of another misconception. I think a misconception is like people know what they're doing, and like no one has any idea what they're doing at all, is like what I've learned. And everyone that looks like they do, they actually have no idea. And like that's not something to be embarrassed about. That's just like the reality of the situation. And it's important to realize, because like when people are giving you advice and you get so much advice, I remember being a start mate, like we had mentors, everyone's giving us different advice. Like they don't know what they're saying. Like you are better placed often than them because you're working on the product every single day. So that's just like another thing to recognize.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all learning. Thanks for sharing that.
But don't tell people you don't know what you're doing.
A lot of the questions that are coming from the audience is based around wellness topic for being a founder. This question is to you guys: is what is the biggest thing you had to sacrifice to take the founder role at such young age? I mean, Cara talked about, there's some misconception that founders work all the time, but in your own words, what did you have to sacrifice?
I think that as a founder, your relationship towards the business evolves. And I definitely think at the start, so I actually realized that I've nearly been working on Steppen for like 2 years next month, which is such a long time when I think about it, especially at this age, is so long. And I think at the start, I felt like every single second I needed to be working on the business. And like, if I wasn't working on the business, then I was letting the team down. And that was like definitely takes a toll on your energy after a while. So I think definitely like you have to sacrifice. And that is kind of what you have to do, especially at the start, because there's no one in the team and you have to literally do every single thing. So I think at the start, there's definitely a lot of sacrifices in terms of just like time, of course, like, and energy. But I think the biggest sacrifice now, taking a step back, is just like what I'm doing as a 23-year-old compared to what most of my 23-year-old friends are doing is just like not aligned. And sometimes it can be hard talking to people our age and being like they've been gone out clubbing or like whatever. And like you've just sat there and had to fire someone, or just had an investor turn you down for a bunch of money, or you had a really big success and they just don't understand. I think that is kind of that can be a hard sacrifice. And I think that's something that you need to definitely go in eyes wide open about, because if that's going to be an issue for you, like it's just like not going to work doing a startup. So I think that's probably the hardest sacrifice, honestly. The rest is like fine. You just conquer it.
Grace?
Mine, I guess, is more stereotypical. Like I had a very rigid study plan. Like I went to Melbourne Uni, I was going to go do their master's program. And so I guess it might not sound like all that much, like just deciding to defer my master's to do a startup, but that was a big compromise on my end. I was looking forward to masters. All my friends were going to do it, and it did. Although like doing startup is so much fun, I did feel that compromise of stepping back from the cohort that I was a part of in uni. And a lot of them are graduating this year as well, this year, next year. And yeah, and it does feel a little bit, it can feel a little bit uneasy, but I definitely don't regret making this choice, because I can go back to uni. And but I think just stepping back from the cohort that I've like started my degree with, that was a compromise that was a bit tricky on my end, and the plan that I was attached to as well. So yeah.
Cool. Liam?
Yeah, I mean, I think you sacrifice a lot. I wouldn't recommend being a startup founder to anyone. I think it actually sucks a lot in a lot of different ways, actually. And you really need to be passionate about the idea that you're solving, the people that you surround yourself with. And because if you're not, it really just sucks. And, it still sucks daily even if you have a really, amazing problem that you're solving, or you've got this really awesome vision. But I think alleviating those, those biggest sacrifices with, spending time away from the company. If, I've just turned 19. So of course, yes, I still go out clubbing. I still go out with my friends. I don't work on, on the company for every hour of the weekend. I would say the biggest sacrifice that I hate is sleep. Don't get much sleep. But yeah, I mean, I think like, to be from a funny side of it, it sucks, but you really gotta love what you do, and it should kind of come naturally. Starting a company, it shouldn't just be. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go and start this company right now, and do everything in one day. It kind of, you have this idea, then it kind of goes to the next phase, then you speak to a few people, then you speak to a few more people, and then you kind of finally get there over time. So yeah, that's probably my answer.
Great. One more question before we head off to the audience Q&A. I would love to know, as a closing remarks, what's the advice that you have for students that are at uni currently, considering starting their own startup full time? Are there any particular roles they recommend that they should go into that will help them build up that skill? Any advice for students?
I can't comment on like where to go work. Like, you go work wherever you want to work. But I guess just like more general advice. I think like everyone, we get asked a lot as founders, like, what is your 10-year vision? What is your 5-year, 10-year vision? That's a very common question. But even more personally, as students, we're actually always asked that as well. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And that's a really daunting question, no matter like how old you are, whether you're like 19, 15, 25, 35. And so I think a lot of people back away from trying to really make a plan, and it's easier to sort of just go with the flow, go with where life takes you. And although that's a great way of living, and that's awesome, I think if you really want to be a high achiever, you do actually have to have that plan and work towards it. And I think that's where like we have a lot of power. Like, you actually have the power today to sort of make a plan and work towards your goals and achieve those goals. And looking back, like, do you want to look back and be like, am I now the person that life sort of made me out to be, or am I the person who I set out to be? I think that's a really important question. Yeah.
Any final words, Liam, Cara, for students?
I think from something I say across the team a lot, if you ask anyone on the team what I say kind of every day, a little bit of strategy and a lot of execution. And I think I ultimately think that's key. It's like, okay, got this idea, now build it. And if it fails, now move on to the next one, build it. But yeah, for me, a little bit of strategy and a lot of execution, and yeah, have fun. Try and have fun.
I was gonna say something similar. I was gonna say, Nike says it well, just do it. I think like there's so many, like if you sit there and think of all the reasons not to do it, you're gonna come up with a lot. But just like start, and the hardest part is always starting. And I think what Liam said before about it just naturally progressing, it sounds like that's been consistent in all of our stories. You just start, and if you're really passionate about it, you keep working, and you'll see that it's go somewhere that you didn't even think it would end up going, which is really cool.
Amazing. We will go to our audience Q&A now. So if you've submitted your questions in the Slido, I'll read them out loud to the panel. One of the common questions that we're getting is, how do you identify a compatible co-founder when most people our age are still exploring career options and different paths? So looking for co-founders. Maybe starting with Grace.
Yeah, it's very much a strategy, and I'm very open with my co-founder about this, but I chose him because he is addicted to working. So like I said, we worked on a whole bunch of different robotic projects together, and he literally just doesn't stop. And I've worked with a whole lot of students on different projects in uni, like rocketry, F1 cars, everything. And he just stood out. Like, he and I were the same. We just went all the time. Even during exam periods, we would take a break by continuing building our robots or building the avionics bay for the rocketry team or whatever. And so that's how I chose him, because I knew that he would push himself, and I wouldn't have to sort of play that role of, but that all being said, like, I don't think I would have that same expectation for employees. But I think as a co-founder, you do need to give it more than the 9 to 5, but not that it's like a compromise. It's something that you should want to give more than just the 9 to 5. And so that's how Taz came on board. And aside from the fact that he's an absolute powerhouse at just building a whole bunch of different things, he built a bionic arm for the sake of it during lockdown because he was bored. So yeah.
Liam, looks like you would have some tips.
Yeah, I don't really have any actually. I think on the other end, how so to meet Will and I had nothing to do with each other before Instant. And I reached out to maybe I'm going to say 100 plus software engineers on LinkedIn, offering them jobs to work for me. And I didn't have any money at this point. I was 17. And Will was one of the guys that responded to me, and I flew to Sydney kind of between 2 lockdowns and met with Will, and we basically just started working on it together. But what I did do was I had Brandon, who's one of my advisors and still works with us today. He was chief product officer at a company called Neato, and they're like Shopify, but for more B2B in that kind of space. And he was working alongside me and just helping me out, and kind of got Will to talk to him, and got the tick. And yeah, I mean, we just kind of started working together. Really luck, I would say, from my end.
For me, I think I was initially working on Steppen by myself, and then I posted about Steppen on my Instagram, and one of someone that I went to school with, Jake, like saw my Instagram post and then just like WhatsApped me and was like, what is this? Like, sounds really interesting. And it was like the middle of COVID lockdown, so we caught up for a walk. And I thought to myself, look, like I'm good at some things, but I'm not good at everything. And there's also a bunch of stuff that I just don't want to have to deal with. And then I kind of thought about Jake's skills, and realized that the things that I didn't want to do and the things I wasn't necessarily good at, he was quite good at. And also because we knew each other, we were literally in the same kindergarten class. We also had that level of trust there because we basically grew up together in a bunch of ways. So it just naturally happened that it made sense for him to join. And then our third co-founder, Dave, again, it was like a skill gap. Jake and I both are not developers. I was studying software engineering, but I was nowhere near being able to code this whole thing by myself. And we were just trying to find someone that could kind of fill that gap for us. And again, we're lucky that this time we were introed to Dave by someone we trusted, and kind of just timing. We basically were like, okay, we want you want to be a part of this. We just need to get you on board like literally right now because the product just went live. So we kind of skipped a bunch of the trust building stuff, but we were really lucky that it's been a really good fit.
Love to hear it. Love the Instagram success story. One of the common questions that we're getting from the chat and from the Slido is, how do you manage someone who is much more experienced than you to work on your team? How do you convince someone like that? And how do you manage a team at such a young age is basically the question. Liam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely challenging for sure. I'd say almost all of us here, maybe, well, in my case, I'm the most senior person on the team, but the youngest. So, yeah, it does have challenges, but I'd say it's not really, you as a founder know the outcome you want to achieve. And so a lot of the work, once it's not just you and your co-founder, or maybe, you know, is just around how you're aligning your team towards that common goal or achieving that common outcome. And you know when someone's kind of fucking around with not letting you achieve that common outcome, right? You don't necessarily need to know the specifics of how you're going to achieve that outcome, or the specifics of how something's best done. And you want people around you that have expertise in software engineering, for example. I've never written a line of code, but we're a software company, we're a tech company. But you know the priorities you need to build, you know when someone's kind of trying to pull the cotton wool over your eyes. And so I'd say just being really, really committed to the outcome you want to achieve, really committed to a long-term goal, and trying to bring and people on that common journey, rather than and setting that expectation that, look, this is a really autonomous team. We're really transparent, but if something comes to it, I'm going to make the decision and let's just go for it. Let's take the bet and let's go from there.
Love that. The next question I would love to ask the panel is, as a young founder, you're making a lot of difficult decisions on who to hire, how to manage a team. One of the questions is, who do you go to for advice on difficult decisions? Cara, would you like to take this one?
Sure. It depends what the decision is, honestly. I think sometimes the best person to go to is someone that just has like literally no context and might not even be a startup person, but just like a friend or something that you just want to kind of explain what's on your mind. So sometimes they're the right person. I think if you are lucky enough to have co-founders, like discussing with your co-founders is really important. And then we're also been really lucky that we did StartMate, which Grace is just finishing off. And we had some great mentors, and I was really lucky that we had Lauren Kaplan as one of our mentors. And like personally for me, she's been an amazing mentor and someone that literally, if I'm stressing out or like having a freak out, I can message her and be like, hi, can you chat for 15 minutes? And I'm totally fine getting on the phone to her and like basically being like, everything's going to shit, like what should we do? And that's the type of relationship that we have, and I'm really lucky to have that. I think though what can be hard as a founder is sometimes like keeping things to yourself or feeling like you can't share with other people. I especially feel that as like CEO, I guess sometimes like I should know what's happening all the time, and that can be hard to navigate. And I think that's something that I can definitely do better, is making sure to bring people in when like there's a decision that I'm not sure about or a hard decision. I think that's always something that I can be more self-aware about.
We have one more question I wanted to ask is, one of the questions that came up is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? Grace, would you like to take this one, as you briefly mentioned about imposter syndrome before?
Yeah, I think well, I mean, I think girls, more stereotypically, girls struggle with imposter syndrome a lot more than guys. I'm also a female in STEM as well, and I think that that sort of accelerated that a little bit as well. I think I first had imposter syndrome actually at my first internship. I got a job working as a mechatronics intern at a space company. They built like nanosatellite constellations, and I just did not feel like I deserved the role at all. I was like, I have no idea. I'm going to rock up on the first day and, I'm going to be a mess, and they're going to completely see through me that I know nothing. But actually at that internship, the prototype I built a prototype reaction wheel, which is this device that stabilizes satellites in low Earth orbit. They actually put that into production and launched that. So I think that was really validating for me, because it made me realize a whole lot of different things. I guess sort of going back to what we said before, a lot of people don't actually know what they're doing. So it's not like everyone's an expert and it's just you who knows nothing and everyone's going to see through you. It's yeah, I don't know. I think there's, especially going through StartMate, we have a lot of mentors who are just so supportive, and I think that that's definitely helped a lot with a lot of the imposter syndrome, because they're literally just always cheering you on. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I think just have fun and then you forget about it, hopefully.
Awesome. I'm gonna pick a question from the chat. Wayne asks, what do you think your superpowers are as a young founders? Do you think you have any superpowers?
Yeah, I'll take this one first. I already kind of touched on this. I think that my superpower is learning things really quickly. Yeah, literally I'll read like 5 articles and I'll be like, cool, I'm an expert at this, because that's just how you have to be. So I think that's definitely my superpower. I think equally as important is like knowing what's not your superpowers, and are the things that like you should get the rest of the team to do. For example, I'm really not good with copy. Like if there's anything copy related, I just like don't put in enough effort to think about it. So that's never a task that I do. So I think it's good to know your superpowers and what would your kryptonite would be the other thing that's really important to know.
Liam?
I don't think I have any superpowers. I think that I'd say, yeah, I think I can tell you what I'm not good at, which is probably software engineering, anything to do with writing a line of code. Still haven't written a line of code today. Yeah, probably just yeah, don't have any clue there.
You're being
Everything
very
else, I don't know.
humble.
I don't know. I don't have a superpower, but I think it's just you got to know a little bit about everything and convince people that you're the expert at that thing.
Mm.
I am the expert because I have to convince people every day. You have to convince yourself that you're the expert. It's like without having a chip on your shoulder, though. I think that's the most important thing. And not having a chip on your shoulder, being able to listen to people, being able to be collaborative, not rushing to make decisions, but going in with context, going in with, you know, a STEMI decision already is key. So yeah, I mean that's kind of a way around your question. I wouldn't say I have any superpowers.
Very humble of you. Grace?
My superpower probably I don't know. I'd like to think that I do get people quite excited about the things I get excited about. I found Abby actually started as a student project, so there was actually 20 of us working on Abby before she became a startup. And I think one thing when I left the student project to do the startup, I found a lot of the feedback was they actually struggled finding a person to fill my role. But the reason they were struggling to find someone, because even though there were 20 people in the team, most people weren't as energized or excited about the vision that we had as I was. And even though they didn't have that, they really liked that I did have that, and they were hoping to find someone who could continue that vision or continue a different vision. So yeah, probably getting people excited about the things that I'm excited about. And I think as co-founders and CEOs, like that's sort of your role. Your role is to get people on board with your vision and convince them that, you know, you're going to be the next unicorn.
And with that, I'm gonna close off the panel. Thank you so much, Liam, Cara, and Grace, for giving us your time and sharing your story.